Attention. It's time to register for Ellucian Live 2024, April 7th through 10th in San Antonio, Texas. Illuminate, innovate, inspire, explore higher education's greatest opportunities with future-ready ideas, solutions, and best practices designed to drive transformation. Register now at elive.ellucian.com. This conference is going to be epic. By now, you've heard me talk about Insights EDU in Phoenix, Arizona, February 20 through 22nd. Here's why I think you should join us at the Insights EDU conference. It's one of the few conferences focused on helping schools serve today's online and non-traditional students. If you're concerned at all about where your enrollments are going to come from in 2024 and beyond, and you should be concerned, you need to be at this conference. Register now at insightsedu.com and use promo code EdUp to save $50.
Prepare to be astonished.
Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, my phone is ringing. My Teams is ringing, so you probably hear that in the background all simultaneously as the wind blows here in St. Louis, Missouri, to the tune of about minus 20 wind chill. So I did come to work, but the wind hit me once, and I almost did fall over. I'll be quite honest. I almost froze to death. But what kept me going was my interview today with the gentleman who I'm going to interview. Do you see how these segues work and how I pull all this together? But before I get to the guest co-host and the guest today, I do want to remind the audience, and I know I'm not supposed to do this. My producer and co-founder, Elvin Freitas, always yells at me that I make these time-bound. But we're literally, when this episode comes out, we'll have passed our 4-year anniversary of the EdUp Experience podcast. You have no idea how excited we are to get to that 4-year anniversary. What have we done? We've done live podcasting across the world. We've been to Doha, Qatar twice podcasting. We've been at higher ed conferences all across the country. We've written a book called Commencement, the Beginning of a New Era in Higher Education, that is based on the first 125 presidents that we interviewed on this podcast, that has sold thousands of copies across the world. And it's just been an honor, ladies and gentlemen, to interview you, our amazing guests, to have incredible co-hosts come back after they've been a guest to co-host and interview others. And that's what this is all about. Organic conversation about the state of higher education today and how we can do better for students, because that's what it's all about, or else none of us have jobs. Let's be quite honest. Coming back again, and really without notice, because he emailed me this morning and I was like, what are you doing in 10 minutes, Jug? Is my guest co-host. I say he has one of the most distinctive voices in higher education. When you hear him, you kind of know it's him, right? And he's in an underground bunker right now. I'm giving him a hard time. Ladies and gentlemen, here he is, the one and only Dr. Chuck Ambrose. He is a senior education consultant at Husch Blackwell and the author of Colleges on the Brink, The Case for Financial Exit, which I can never say. Chuck, how's it going?
Joe, good to be with you. And the short notice is determined, and I know I've messed this up every time I've co-host, so I'm not going to do it today. The short notice was dictated by there's nobody better in higher ed that I would want to talk to and at least listen to than our guest. So
wow.
Thanks for inviting me.
Before we get to the guest, because he does have a lot to say, so I could see the work that he's done, and I follow his work too. But you've written a book, Colleges on the Brink. And I don't think there's been a better time for this book to hit. And so I want you to use this EdUp platform to plug your book so intentionally, and, just tell everybody about your book and how it's going and why you wrote it.
Yeah, again, our guest today, right, has illustrated where we are in regards to the value prop of college. And unfortunately, right, the systemic disparities that the pandemic have kind of illuminated, we're in that inflection point for higher ed. Maybe some would argue we're beyond it. But at the end of the day, the impact, right, on how well we do our work affects the generational mobility of students. And 4 decades ago, we decided that college should work for all, and it doesn't. Right. And our responsibility is to provide the skills, competencies, talents required to be competitive. And we're going to figure it out. But College is on the Brink is a playbook to get from where we've been to where we should go. And Joe, your projection of energy and future focused and leadership through EdUp helps a lot of people do that. So again, every time I have a chance to be in the conversation, but again, with this guest today, talking about ROI and kind of changing the narrative, it's great to be with you.
Well, thank you. And I would encourage the audience to go buy Chuck's book and his co-author, Mike Neitzel. They're good guys. That's the reason why you should go do it. They've done a lot of great work in higher ed. And it's important that we support each other as well. So, but let's get to our guest, because I think there's just a few questions that we have for him. Just a few. I don't think we have enough time in the day, actually, to get all the questions out. Ladies and gentlemen, you know his work because you probably follow him whether you know it or not if you're reading anything about higher education. He is the one and only Tony Carnevale. He is a director and researcher at the Center for Education and Workforce at Georgetown University. How are you?
I'm good. Glad to be here.
You know, I got to Carnevale. Feels good to say your last name, I got to tell you.
I got 50 cents when I learned to spell it.
Yeah, well, my last name's Salustio, so I'm still working. Working on that sucker.
Good to see you, brother.
Uh-huh. How are you? How are things?
Things are good. I mean, I have a dream job. I used to work really hard and had lots of restraints on my work. When I came to Georgetown, Jack DeGioia, the president of Georgetown, and I go way back, but I asked him, every job I've ever had, there are things you can't say. And if you stumble and say them, you're in trouble. So I asked him, well, just tell me, Jack, I don't want to stumble here. What is it I'm not supposed to say? And he said, you can say anything you want. I got a lot worse people than you around here.
Tell them like it is.
I love it. I love it. Well, that's great, because we need you to say the things that you're saying. And, Tony, you're one of the individuals out there that is doing, let me restart that. There's so much narrative around college value, supported by facts, not supported by facts. And what makes you, I think, a leader in the space is the fact that it's always fact supported. You're doing research to prove a theory or a hypothesis, but there's so much anti-college. College is not worth it. College, I joke, I see this ad. It keeps coming up on my Instagram, and it's a picture of Elon Musk, and he's got like a Superman suit on, and he's flexing, and it says you can learn more on YouTube than you can with a college degree. And you think, who's this impression? Who's getting impressed by this and the dangers of some of the narrative out there? What's the general sense of this conversation, Tony? That's where I want to start. Why do you do the work that you're doing, and what is being said out there about college?
We have entered a bad season for our American colleges. My own bias about this, a lot of my work over the years prior to coming to Georgetown was political. And a lot of this is politics. That is, we have a culture war going on that bids college against what I think are center-right kinds of views and center-left. And the difficulty in specific terms lately is both political parties are depending on the working class to win. That is, Biden needs the blue wall in the middle of the country, north, and the Republican Party has to maintain the loyalty of the white working class. And so that sets up, in combination with the culture war, a powerful incentive to degrade the value of college. One of my favorites is Joe Biden says all the time that, you can get a job at $130,000 a year because of our infrastructure bill with only a high school degree. What he doesn't tell you is that even with the infrastructure bill, that is less than 0.1% of the high school working class. So we're in a moment when college is taking a beating. And I don't think it will end anytime soon.
So so we've really politicized college. It's a lightning rod for political aspirations. Is that?
And it has been before, of course. I mean, we know, and there are debates within the higher education community about value versus economic value versus non-economic value, which are very healthy debates because both are real. And what we know, incidentally, in the literature, in the data, is that the general education you get with a degree, in combination with the specific education, is where, in your major, is where you get the highest return. Now, a lot of it depends on what your major is, because some majors pay a lot more than others. But there is it's a fractious time. I mean, our sort of knee-jerk response to this at my center, which is somewhat self-serving, but our knee-jerk response to this is just be transparent. I mean, just present the facts, defend general education, defend specific education, be willing to train people as well as educate them. I think that's the world we're headed for. But transparency is really, I think, crucial along the way. If the public doubts you, give them the fact. In some ways, it's the only defense you have.
Yeah, you know, I think the danger of the narrative sometimes is, and we talk about equity in higher education all the time. You know, how do we create more access and equity within college? And you wonder who is the person that is saying to their kid, or what adult is thinking to themselves, college is not worth it. And what is that? I don't think it's the middle upper white class. It's your underprivileged students. You know, somebody's going, hey, college is not worth it. You saw this article where the employers are dropping college degrees, and you go, yeah, I mean, maybe a couple, but who are the employee? Who are they? And what does that do to the generational wealth that education builds? What does that do to those that are trying to move up within to get to the middle class even? Is it danger? Is it as dangerous as, and I say it's dangerous because I hear it from so many college leaders. Is it as dangerous as I'm saying for those that are looking to better themselves, that they're being dissuaded?
Well, we know who's listening. That is, if you're a middle class or upper middle class family in America, college is part of your cultural heritage. It is the way we're approaching, I think it's 20% of American families have two BA parents, right? Both parents have a BA. We know that those folks, the one way, unless they're Bill Gates or somebody, the one way you can pass on your middle class status or give middle class status to your kids is to send them to college. Now, that's not universally true, but it's 70% true. So there is those people aren't listening. They're going to do it anyway. So it's almost a cultural, I think little kids know from the time they're in their first decade that they're supposed to go on to college. Other kids don't. And we know in the data, incidentally, those are the ones who listen. And then we have a policy debate which relates to this, which gets complicated, which is to what extent do we do training versus education? I think we should do both. And I understand there's a dilemma there because we know who's going to get the training, and it's going to be lower income, minority. And in the end, we've got to do something about that. So as we move into training, which the government is doing fairly fast, I think that's a good thing. But there is an issue there about who gets training and who gets education.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
Somebody we talked about listening, somebody that never listens to anything I say is my guest co-host, Dr. Chuck Ambrose. So I'll just pass it over to you. I know, Chuck, we're getting you today pretty good.
Tony, again, just humbled to be in this conversation with you because, as you know, we've relied on the center, your voice, the data, in so many vital ways, right, to make the case. And I actually have two questions, one related to those external forces, but one related to what we've done to ourselves, right, as an industry and as an enterprise. Those disincentives, right, from a policy standpoint, when when a state actually incentivizes students to uh, go to work when they're 16 years old, to uh, basically give certs and training within within a secondary environment that, let's say in a state that already has a low college going rate. Have you extrapolated out what the economic loss is, right, by the lack of college, right? Because when you start talking about $14.2 trillion of generational earnings, there's got to be almost an equal amount of losses when we put college in the vortex of this battle.
We've just done a report that I think you're quoting from, that we went and looked because we do projections of jobs and demand for education, right? Those projections out to 2031, which we dropped maybe 3 weeks ago, I forget. They show that in future, by 2031, there'll be 171 million jobs. We can quibble over the one. But of those jobs, 40% will require either a BA or a graduate degree. Another 30% will require either a 2-year degree or a certificate. And another 30% will require only high school. On the other hand, 75% of the BA plus or BA graduate degree jobs are good jobs. They pay more than 55 at a minimum between the ages of 30 and 45, and they pay 75 at a minimum between the ages of 45 and 64. So in the end, you can get a good job without college. The odds are just much lower. And the other thing is you need to be careful when you're talking about middle skilled jobs. It's maybe 38%, that is 2-year degrees and certificates, let's say. Almost 40% are good jobs, especially now with infrastructure and some other things that are going on. But only less than 20% of the high school, the jobs that require high school are good jobs. So there are different, in a lot of those are in the data are males over the age of 40. So anyway, it's our, not for me, but it's our dads and granddads for younger people. So the story is clear. When we release the projections, we really get, this time, first time, we really got hammered, saying, well, that's not true. College is no longer necessary, et cetera, et cetera. We've done it many times before. I mean, we've done this for 15 years.
Right.
This is the first time that, and really biting attacks, because it's just in the air at the moment. I mean, that's okay. I mean, we're, not immune to criticism. But in the end, what is most striking about it is the fact that this bias is damn near universal. I think the number we came up with in this latest study is that it would add another 13 or so trillion dollars to the economy if everybody got some college. That is, all the people who didn't. And I think that's where the number is. I'm tempted somewhere between 11 and 13 trillion dollars. Now, there are issues there. Could the economy actually create that many good jobs? The answer at the moment is no. That is, given our definition of a good job, which is an earnings-based definition, there aren't enough to go around if everybody got college.
Well, Tony, we came into contact through Lumina, I think, and when we were doing the Innovation Campus in Missouri, and I know you've been in the space of kind of blending work, training, and college, as we tried to do through P20 work. But the factors within, right, that are structural. Let me give you 3 or 4 that I've always kind of considered our deficits, and then tell me which ones have had a bigger impact. Cost, right? Just the cost of college, the time it takes to get a degree, right? Which for most people today is way too long. Skills gap, right, between the degrees we produce and the talents required. And then debt, right? Because this report coming out of Clearinghouse last week that said a third of those who shoulder debt don't have a degree. To me, that's our responsibilities, right? So of those, right, which which ones contribute the most, right, to not recognizing or listening or being drawn in? I mean, I think we've got to figure this out. Uh, Time, money, right? Outcomes, and aren't we a little bit like healthcare, where we're moving to more of a funding model on outcomes, and that's ultimately where the economics of this is going?
Well, it's an interesting question because truthfully, with fancy econometrics, we could probably sort through that. Frankly, we never have. You give me an idea here, how you would weight these things. They're all destructive of college attainment or post-secondary education and or training attainment. And more, it's both. That's one of the things that's striking about the last decade. So for example, more than 75% of people with industry-based certifications, of which there are now 40 million, I think, in the American workforce. Things like in the old days, it would have been a Microsoft network certification. You have to pass an exam to get the certification. But 70% of people who have certifications also have degrees. So more and more, it's not training or college or training or degrees. It's both, more and more. And I think that, we think about things like AI, this sort of fantastic rate of technology change. It's going to be both for a lot of people. So I think that's the cost issue has always been the core of the angst over college. It's something that most people didn't have to do for their kids. For example, many years ago when I went to college, I think I was one of 3 kids in my senior high school class that went to college.
Really?
Yes. I'm from northern Maine, so I don't mean for that to be the explanation, but truthfully it is. So this has changed, and suddenly the public had to confront this. That is, if you're going to do well by your children, you had to get them to college. Not to do so became a sign of failure. So we put enormous pressure on American families when the economy moved us in this direction. It's not some arbitrary, I won't go on and on about that, but people keep saying, well, you don't need a college degree to do these jobs or some post-secondary or training, et cetera. The answer is yes, you do. And the business literature will show you why. But anyway, so cost is the root of all this. The question is how we deal with cost, and there's an important policy and political question there that's very dicey. But in the second thing is time. And yes, I mean, I have and this is sort of a working class critique, and it's not fair. That is, I remember I had to go through 12 years of history, English, math, et cetera, to get a high school degree. I wasn't particularly enamored of any of it, frankly. It was a going to work. I mean, it didn't have much to do with my life. And then when I went to a 4-year college, so the first 2 years, it was more general education, 14 years. And then I got to pick a major. Time, it is one of the great enemies here in the sense that I think we've built a pathway that makes a lot of kids, the skill they need or the quality they need is perseverance. We don't get them interested very early. Now, a lot of people are interested in the academic subjects. In the end, I majored in intellectual and cultural history in college, then went to graduate school because I had to get a job. So, there is time is, and time, the other element of time that I mentioned quickly, which I think is maybe even more important, and that is the age at which young people reach what economists used to think of as financial independence. In the 1970s, the median young person, male and female, when they achieved the average wage for their gender, right? And the female wage was lower, of course, the male wage was higher. That was economists would say they were ready for family formation. That is, they had achieved a certain level of independence. That age was 25 years old. That age is now 32 years old. So there is this other time dimension in which you need work experience, you need more education, and you got to pay for it. You need work experience. Generally, you need 3 jobs to get a real get real traction. And then debt, of course, we know directly. That is, there are lots of studies about this, and they all say the same thing. They show that lower earning families, especially families where you don't have two BAs at the head of the household or no BAs at the head of the household, these people don't make a lot of money and they are debt averse. It scares them. That is, they got enough with the car, and maybe if they're lucky, they got the house, and then suddenly junior's got to go to college. I mean, it is crushing. So in the end, they are debt averse, and we know directly that debt relates directly to choices young people make, and you can feel one way or the other about that. That is, I really love to major in English, but I'm going to major in education so I can be a school teacher. Do we want people to have fewer choices? Debt has a lot to do with that. So it's all three. They're kind of the three horsemen that keep people from getting the education they need. One other point I would make, and to me, it's a fundamental point, and that is beginning in the 19th century in Western would-be democracies, because we weren't then, a lot of us weren't, you had a great debate between communists, anarchists, monarchists, and people who were in favor of Republicans and democratic governments. They're all kind of conflicting with each other. What they, in the end, in our world, in the West, capitalism and democracy or republics won. And the deal always among those economists, and these are in the middle 1800s, they agreed that in a capitalist society, people were going to be unequal for all kinds of reasons, like, who your daddy was and how much money your mother had. And people are going to be unequal. But in a republic or a democracy, everybody was equal. That is, before the law, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those two ideas were in conflict. One major part of our system created inequality, but benefited all of us. I still think that's true. And that is capitalism. And then secondly, we had a governmental system that demanded equality. What they came up with back in those days was education. They thought education was something that had to be done because in the end, education would make people, in those days, they used to say gentlemen because they were sexist as hell. But, you could, education would give you choice. That is, it would make you a capable citizen to decide what the appropriate balance was between democracy and capitalism, and those issues were going to constantly come up. So, but in those days, education had nothing to do with getting a job. After progressively it did, and after 1985, really, we saw that it was post-secondary education or training. That's when we tipped over into the very modern era.
I want to go back to what you said about time. I got two questions and I'll pass back to Chuck. What do you make of the 3-year degree, the beginnings of the 3-year bachelor degree movement here in the U.S.? Right? There's right now 2 schools, Ensign College and American Public University System, that will be offering a 90-unit bachelor's degree. Positive, negative? Is this a watershed moment for higher ed where we're going to see more of this catch on? Is it? What do you make of it?
Well, I'm not. I work in a university, and I taught 1 year in high school way back in the day, which was the most exhausting job I've ever had. And so I don't know. I mean, I'm not somebody who there's an answer to that curriculum that goes way beyond my depth. I mean, I think the point is, if you can give people a good education, offer them both general and specific. I mean, specific gets easy. You can give somebody a good specific education in a year or less. So there are people who think, well, for instance, I hear an argument from a lot of people. The example I often hear is, why can't we create 2 to 3 year engineers? Because if you took the whole curriculum, mashed it all together, why does everybody have to wait 4 years to get that? The part of the answer is we do know, and the literature says this over and over again, it's not much talked about in public, but the combinations of general and specific education, let's say the humanities and your engineering major, they give you the most leverage in the labor market, both for individuals in terms of it's more important in America than in Europe, for example, because we're much more loose, unregulated economy. It gives people the ability to move from job to job. It makes them more prone to get training or take training or go back to school. And in the end, the uber economists, which I'm not one of, the great people, the people who are so very good with numbers, they've demonstrated over and over again that idea, which is very American, the idea of the degree, actually makes the economy itself more flexible. So it is but it's not something people generally know. It is, it's a National Bureau of Economic Research papers. There are half equations and one summary at the front. But that's been known for a long time. But it's very hard because when you try to sell that to the public, there's a lot of it all depends there. That it all depends on your specific major. It all depends on the quality of your general major. It all depends on the occupation you go into, the industry, what geographic area you're coming from or working in. It's complicated. But in the end, the combination that's most powerful, the most powerful combination, by the way, at the BA level is petroleum engineer. So if you get a petroleum engineering degree in America, and I think this is still true, it's true 2 years ago, and it's been true for a long time. If you get a petroleum engineer degree, you can make up between 120 and 140 right off the bat. And then you go up from there. So, and interestingly, the graduate degree doesn't do that much good. But so we know that, but it is a complicated set of choices. And part of the problem we have here, and one of my sort of smug solutions, because it is a little smug, with the higher ed people, is just be transparent. Quit hiding the ball. Let's, just be transparent. People will want to take history. I did in the end. It was the most interesting thing, and I wasn't smart enough to think about my future, truthfully.
Makes two of us.
Yeah, no, it was, it was a wonderful experience for me.
Yeah.
So we need to be transparent, and I think we need to sell general education harder, because it's not only about, it's about a lot of things. It's about the proper functioning of a republic, as I think we're learning the hard way now. And we did a study with the European Union. We were the designated American group to study the United States on the impact of education on the development of authoritarian attitudes. Long title. And to my surprise, because usually my experience with data is you always go in thinking one thing and you come out thinking something else because the data won't support your bias. But in this case, I was surprised. It turns out in the United States, access to degrees and the humanities have a dampening effect on the development of authoritarian attitudes, more than in our corresponding European nations.
Boy, I got so many questions. This is going to, I don't know what you're doing today, Tony, but you're stuck with me until about 4 o'clock Central. No, I wouldn't do that to you. No matter what you do, and no matter what data you put out, there's always this.
I have a hard time believing you.
Right? Does that affect you at all? Do you just put out the data because you're a researcher and you're just going to produce the data? Or do you get to the point where you're trying to prove something because you want to? I mean, I feel that way sometimes. I'm like, I'm going to interview these people about the positive effects of higher education because nobody else is championing it in a certain way. So I'll just put them on the podcast and say, tell me all the great things about higher ed. And no matter how many great things we say, there's always somebody that says,
I have a hard time believing you.
And it doesn't matter whether it's data informed or not.
Yeah, sounds like my children there. But anyway, and they do. I'm convinced that they'll someday find out that I was right. But anyway, in the end, what we have, the reason we exist, my center, is because in the American case, the foundations, which is where we get our money, if not from Georgetown, but because Georgetown helps us too.
Right.
But the foundations in the United States, a large share of them believe, and the ones that believe in upward mobility and trying to push opportunity, and that's most of them I know of, but their answer is almost always education, 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 right?
Right.
So the opportunity I had, because I'm not an educator, I mean, I was a high school teacher for a year, but in the end, the reason we got funded was because their presumption, which is we're going to use education to get this done, which dates all the way back to the early industrial conversations about the role of education, with an updated story that says, and it matters in terms of your earnings, which is what's new, because it didn't always matter. The reason we got funded literally was because there were no projections of education demand in the the Department of Education refused to do it. The Department of Labor refused to do it. I'm still mystified by that because they should have taken us out of the business a long time ago. But you know, the combination of labor and education, you know, there's a mall between those two departments, and it all falls on the mall, and nothing happens. So in the end, the reason we got funded was because we were investigating the premise of these foundations. They wanted to know they were right. Now, we didn't set out to prove them right, because what happened when we started doing work of this kind, we found that not every job requires a college degree. And we found out what happened. There's an evolution in the data here, and the data came to the point with the college scorecard that we now know the value of individual programs. It's not just colleges here. And one of two things that's happened since the 80s in America is the value of education beyond high school in general, that is your attainment level, increased. And that's something that college presidents like to say, and they're right. But what they don't say as much is what changed even more were the differences in value of different programs. So there's huge variation now in the earnings returns to different programs. So it's interesting for me because we've been on both sides of this. I don't believe what you say, which is, first of all, the educators didn't like what we said because we started talking about programs. And now with this tide, and I think it's political and cultural, against education, especially degreed education, now we're being criticized because somebody who criticized us very sharply 2 months ago when we released said, you know, every college president ought to have your study up on their wall, but I don't believe it's true because it says they're important. So we've been on both sides of this. Back in the early days, say the first 7 or 8 years we did this work, we were regarded as an annoying problem by the higher education community. That's less true now because we prove they're valuable. So now the other people are saying, actually, they say we're part of some sort of higher education industrial complex is one of the phrases.
It's the higher ed Illuminati, you know. Sorry, guys, I can't tell you about it. Chuck might be able to tell you about it.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not. For a third straight year, the EdUp Experience will be recording live at Illusion Live 2024 this year in San Antonio, Texas, April 7th through the 10th. Illuminate, innovate, and inspire. That's the framework for the conference. Leaders from institutions around the world will converge at Illusion Live 2024 to discover game-changing technology, share industry insights, and build powerful connections. It's time to explore higher education's greatest opportunities with future-ready ideas, solutions, and best practices designed to drive transformation. You can register now at elive.illusion.com.
Epic.
Oh, yeah.
You've heard me talk about the Insights EDU conference. Well, let me tell you 3 reasons why I think everyone listening should join us in Phoenix, Arizona on February 20 through 22nd for Insights EDU. 1, it's one of the few conferences focused on helping schools serve today's online and non-traditional students. 2, you can expect a mix of speakers you won't hear anywhere else, including higher ed leaders from Google, LinkedIn, Adobe, and more. And reason 3, Insights EDU has an agenda packed with sessions discussing the latest trends in higher ed leadership, marketing, and enrollment management. Register now at insightsedu.com and use promo code EdUp to save $50 off your registration.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I'm with Joe. I think we could end this sometime later this afternoon over some adult beverages or something. But Tony, I mean, you so your work and Joe's question about people just disagreeing and arguing with data, and especially underlining kind of the need for transparency. Um, you've been such a I think the work of the center and your voice has been kind of helping us frame right outcomes, value. Yes, right. When it tells us we're a value, we like it, right? When we think differently about alternative paths to mobility, maybe not so much. But there's a narrative that's been created internal to the institution, the raw fact that we've got way too many people who cost too much that students who are willing to pay or able to pay can resource, right? So you said we kind of go back to the core of cost. And I actually thought the recession and part of the work we did in Missouri, I thought really a disruptive model for blending the lines between high school and college, from school to work, the P20 work. I thought cost was I thought we were going to have to change. We haven't really even figured it out through a pandemic, right? So if a recession wasn't enough for an economic disruption, a pandemic, do you see if you were taking the outcome data and value, what would you tell a college president to respond to first and most?
I think if you're the leader of any institution, and boy, I don't envy a lot of college presidents now, in what they're asked to do. If you're the leader of any institution in this economy and society, it is very much a capitalist system. And the bottom line is your business model.
It's broke.
Yeah, the bottom line is the bottom line. And in the end, the power of that is lost, I think, on the general public or people who talk about this. In the end, colleges and churches have business models. I mean, they're not. So I feel sorry, frankly, for a lot of college presidents. Now, I have some biases about the business model. And a lot of this comes up in the recent affirmative action decision. That is, people are pushing very hard, saying, let's not use race anymore, let's use class for affirmative action's sake. And we'll get race that way, but that is a statistically debatable proposition. But the bottom line on that, in my experience with people who've tried to do that, and I've been involved in this through a couple of foundations, sort of in an advisory role, what you run into immediately in a room full of college presidents is they will say to you, if you want me to get 20% Pell, if you want me to get a high percentage of low-income kids in my school, the bottom line is I can't afford it. And now, in some cases, if you're talking to somebody who's the president of a college with a 60 gazillion bank account on the side, the answer there is, if I touch that money, I get fired. So my only recourse to get more lower income kids in is I will never be home. I'll be on the road all year long if I've got enough leverage to raise money. And that's what's coming out after this decision. All the studies are showing that. And that is that we don't, the system doesn't work. Pell Grants will not cover, completion of a college degree in anything like a selective college. That is because of the cost. Oh, I don't, and now we've got this bill on the Hill for training, which I like very much, but I try to stay away from the pay-fors, as they call them, the way they're going to finance it, because they're going to tax college endowments. That's what they want to do.
Yeah, right, right.
I don't want to be part of that conversation. But so after a while, I get tired of being beaten about the head and ears. But I think that is a reality here. That is, your business model dictates your possibility, and then after that, it's your values.
So let me drill down that real quick, Joe, because there's a core, again, truth in what you're saying. And you underlined, right, the value of the humanities. You underlined the synthesis and creativity and the breadth of learning that you take through general ed as it contributes to a major. Tony, the data internally would say, and again, you underline this, those those programs that have been really productive, their outcomes in regards to debt to earnings or gainful employment or all those kinds of things. But we don't resource that way, right? The humanities as a discipline, as a collection of disciplines, are not broken, but how we've allocated the resources to the humanities is, right. You just can't afford the way that we have elected to deliver, right? So, um, there's as much internal data that can align, right, outcomes to value, as you're illustrating externally to once kind of equate that to the degree. What's your take, right, on the department's financial transparency and gainful employment requirements that are coming to really provide value statements on programmatic level? I think we should be doing that.
Yeah, I think it is inevitable. In some ways, it's already arrived. That is the college scorecard, the recent gainful employment regulations, and I keep forgetting it, the DVT, which is
Financial transparency, right?
FTP,
Right?
Anyway, I can never remember.
B?
There's too
P?
many acronyms out there. So there is a deluge of data coming. And I think the gainful employment regs and this new website they're going to build at the Department of Education with a lot more data. And then there's the possibility of the College Transparency Act, which just blows the top off, which is a bill that is stuck on the Hill. It's become a political football. It'll eventually pass. I have a feeling that by the time it passes, we won't need it anymore, because the department is being quite aggressive about this. Surprisingly to me. I mean, I'm the sort of person that would rather duck than get hit. So so I think we're going to have all that information. What I hear people say, and I'm not an educator, have never tried to run an education institution. Nobody would be dumb enough to allow me to do that. But what I do hear from legislators more and more is this set of questions. One of them, who I remember because he said it and nobody really had an answer for him, including me. He from a big state, and he said, we've got 20, I've forgotten the number, I'm making these up. We've got 20 places where we're funding an English literature major across our system. Why not 5? And if you want to do English Lit as part of your BA, you can take it online from one of those 5 campuses. If you really want to major in English Lit, you should probably go to one of those campuses. Now, yes, that causes some inconvenience for people, but this so-called cafeteria model, which is, I think, what a lot of higher ed, the four-year schools are, is if somebody gets a new program in environmental music, everybody's got to get that program because you want to be able to offer it as like in a big cafeteria. We got everything: cheeseburgers, hamburgers, no meat hamburger. We got it all. So I think that, that model is inherently expensive and not sensible in economic terms. Specialization is one of the geniuses of, at least in terms of the ideas in economics. So I think this issue, I think the states especially are going to deal with this. Fed's never going to, I think. The Fed's never going to touch this. And if I were them, I wouldn't. Leave it to the states. On the other hand, the Fed is more and more responsible on the funding side. At some point, the Feds and the federal government, the Congress and the administration, and several administrations now since George Bush started this with the hooking up wage records to curriculums. He did it first in high school. And that's grown. And that system is going to be the system, at least from, and I think the consensus on the way we'll use that system is that, because I hear this all the time, is we want transparency for degrees. The first bill on this was called Know Before You Go. And, if you want to major in, because I remember this specifically in one conversation, if you want to major in archaeology, somebody raised their hand in the room, said, Senator, are you saying I'm not going to be able to major in archaeology? Well, the senator, who's not an idiot, said, of course, I'm not going to stop you from majoring in archaeology, but I'm going to tell you what's likely to happen to you if you did, and then you make up your own mind. We'll make you eligible for federal funds and so on. We're not going to start determining what people take in school. So, and then we're going to have accountability for training. And the transparency will be, of course, if we ever get a counseling system, which we don't have, will be a way to start to help people make the economic decision along with the education decision. But we have no counseling system in America. Our estimates is that it would cost about $25 billion. So I don't see, although this administration and others are focusing on counseling now, because we now have the data. So people are saying, we shouldn't just rely on one-off searches to the college scorecard. We need to provide a service here, and it needs to start in high school.
Well, that's similar, the personalized learning movement within K-12, right? You can customize how you learn, what you learn, and the outcomes, get advanced. As you say that, those elements of transparency, and of course, it goes to borrowed defense, right? Stewardship of Title IV, right? And the recipients, of Title IV, fragile, as you mentioned, and just loans and borrowing. You have to be stewards to those dollars and have outcomes that present mobility. So we couldn't do it though, Tony, without the center, right, to help illuminate the story.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, we a lot of us rely on your data to tell a story, and higher ed needs to tell a better story about its value. I think we've talked about the repackaging of the way we talk about higher education. I want to leave you just a few minutes, Tony, to talk about learning and earning by degrees, a new report that you put out. Can you give us a 2-minute summary of the report and some of the key themes that came out of it?
So the reason we did this is we have a recurrent, we feel, responsibility to do projections because the Labor Department, the Ed Department won't do it. We thought along the way that they would do it because we kept doing it using their data. But in the end, one of the things that began to happen, it was really this time most notably, is we kept saying things that the public didn't believe. That is, the trajectory on this since 1983 has been very clear, which is more and more occupations and jobs require education beyond high school, and the engine on the train are the degrees. Now, you can have a movement, and there is one, skill-based hiring. It's very hard to disagree with it. If somebody doesn't have a degree and they can do the job, I think most Americans, we're all individualists in the end. We would say, well, damn it, they ought to get the job, right. not just the person with the degree. On the other hand, that's going to get very complicated, and lawyers are going to be involved. So, I think what we then did is, okay, we've always done this we've always done retrospective work because by definition, if you're not doing projections, your data is retrospective. So we've always looked backwards to see. That's how you find out what's going on currently. So what we did is we looked backwards and said, okay, over the past 10 years, and we stopped at COVID because that would have really screwed up the data. We said, how much has post-secondary education contributed both to, in general, state GDP and national GDP and a variety of other things, differences among women, minorities. We tried to do disability, but the data wouldn't help. Retrospectively, how have we done? And this is of interest to a lot of governors, for example, because a lot of them have set goals and so on and so on. Although they're coming off that and going more to training now, in my experience, which I don't think is unhealthy. In the end, what we discovered is the contributions are huge. We did the most complicated econometrics we could think of to do this, and in the end, the benefits are huge. What we also found that is equally important is the differences by race, class, and gender have essentially not changed over the past decade, even though everybody has benefited. That is, there are numbers for every group. The worst numbers, and I must say this, in the last decade or so, as the data has become available, indigenous people in America, they come out dead last by a lot. To the point where it's sort of striking to me. The data gets better and better, and I keep thinking, well, there's something wrong with this data. But it's pretty clear now in the last several years, there's nothing wrong with the data. It's true. So it's a very American conclusion. Everybody has benefited. Everybody has moved up, but nobody's changed their position in the race, because the people at the front of the line with more money, the white kids, all the sort of things we don't like to talk about in the United States, that still governs. Everybody's running faster, so everybody holds their position. On the other hand, everybody's benefit. That is, the benefits are broadly distributed across different groups. But nobody changes their position in the race.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you talk about Indigenous people. One of the things we're doing here at EdUp, and I'm just doing a quick plug, Dr. Erica Moore, she's a VP over at AHEC, the American Indian Higher Education Consortium. We're having her do a mini-series within the EdUp experience, highlighting today's tribal colleges and university presidents. So we can get those presidents on en masse to tell their story and use this platform to do so. So we're trying to do something about that, to give a louder microphone to those presidents to talk about some of the issues that they have. But this report is really incredible. I mean, if you go through it, you talk about college degree attainment. This finding was really interesting, that women with graduate degrees earn a median lifetime income of around 2.1 million, while men with a bachelor's degree earn 2.5. And so that's driving a huge gender wage gap, which is as important to solve as the educational attainment gap. So there's a lot of data in here. This one blew my mind, that you estimated that if 11.3 million adults who would need college degrees to close the attainment gaps with white adults earned equal pay, there would be 6.3 trillion more in lifetime earning gains. I mean,
I got that number wrong before.
Yeah, well, I wanted to say it. I had it in front of me, and then I didn't put
two
and two
together.
Thank you. 6.3 trillion more in lifetime earning gains if more people earned a degree at the same rate as white adults and earned equal pay. Pretty amazing stats, Tony, and your work's incredible. I have to close the episode, or else I will keep you here all day, but I have to ask you what you see for the future of higher education before I let you go.
I think higher education is in trouble. I think to some extent, apart from its rightful rise as an institution in American life, and most notably in American economic life, it's starting to stumble. And I don't think it's higher ed's fault. That is, people are turning against these. Yeah, sure, there are all sorts of issues in higher education, all sorts of things that need to be done. Part of my shtick these days is we not only need an education system, we need a training system. We've got to find a way to unify the two. Because we are the worst training nation among the more developed countries in the world, by far. So in the end, I think it's going to be a bumpy ride for a while, and it's nasty. I mean, that's the other thing. It's personal. It's gotten personal, and that's why I say, I mean, it is a job, unless you're going to go someplace that's sitting pretty, with the demographic decline in the college age population, with rising costs, with ill repute among the public for higher ed, distrust, which is common among lots of institutions now, but higher ed is coming in for its share of that, clearly. I just think it's a tough time. And I think in the end, I think the system takes time. I think the system is gradually moving in very healthy directions. It takes a long time to do these things. And I think the politicians have done the right thing. That is, they are hopefully not going to interfere with what you learn or what you choose to learn. That's none of their business, in my view. And I think most of them agree with that. But they've done the one thing they could do without overstepping their bounds, which is transparency. We want this to be, we're not going to pull. The other thing about this is we're not going to pull the money out of higher ed, because since Jimmy Carter, he was the first guy to figure this out with his focus groups. And back in those days, I did political work, so I know about this intimately. The focus groups began to say, what do you want? And they wanted aid for higher education for their kids. And since Carter, Clinton made a false step on this. That is, he proposed school to work, which was a way to get vocational education sort of back into high school after we kicked vocational education out of high school and replaced it with career and technical education, which I think is better and doesn't track like voc ed did by race, class, and gender. So Clinton, by the time his second term came around, he stopped saying school to work, because I've checked all the records and he never said it in the second campaign. He moved on to aid for higher education. And that gave him part of his margin was that. And ever since then, Democrats have known this and glommed onto it, which is why you got, first Obama saying you need one more year after high school. You got that from the Council of Economic Advisors. I thought that wasn't a very good rhetorical statement, because it was a literal interpretation of the data. You needed one more year. Well, what does that mean?
Gap year.
Anyway, so and then you went to George Bush said first, he said his commission on higher ed said people don't need college degrees, but they need some kind of education or training after high school. Then you get the full-blown version, which is free college. And now with Biden, free community college. I think that's where we're going. I think it's a good thing. But it's got to be accountable and it's got to be transparent.
Well, we'll count on you to hold us all accountable with all of your work and data you're doing for Georgetown. So, accountability comes around, doesn't it? We're all accountable to something, and somebody that's accountable for making this episode even better than it would have been with Tony and myself is my guest co-host today. He's the one and only Dr. Chuck Ambrose, best-selling author. He is an amazing higher ed consultant for Hush Blackwell. Chuck, what'd you think of this episode?
Tony, just so grateful, right, to be able to say thank you to the center and your leadership. I think what's next is exciting, right, as a lot of this continues to blend. I think a lot of the things that you illuminate says that time is going to accelerate for change, because we are more transparent and data can move us forward. So not only keep doing what you're doing, but again, I hope we can connect and maybe think together on a few things. I'll reach out to you.
Yeah, I look forward to it. It's good to see you and good to meet you.
Good to meet you too, Tony.
Salustio.
Come on,
Salustio.
Carnevale. Come on, man.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, he is the one and only Dr. Tony Carnevale. He is a director and researcher at the Center for Education and Workforce at Georgetown University. Tony, we hope you had a good time on the podcast today, too, talking about your work.
Yeah, I did. It was nice and positive, and thank you for that.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd.
Attention.
It's time to register for Ellucian Live 2024, April 7th through 10th in San Antonio, Texas. Illuminate, innovate, inspire, explore higher education's greatest opportunities with future-ready ideas, solutions, and best practices designed to drive transformation. Register now at elive.ellucian.com. This conference is going to be epic. Hey there, higher ed leaders. Are you thinking about joining the EdUp Experience podcast at Insights EDU on February 20th through 22nd in Phoenix, Arizona?
100%.
I thought so. This is the go-to event for higher education marketing and enrollment management. At Insights EDU, you'll gain cutting-edge insights from industry experts, including speakers from companies like Google, LinkedIn, Adobe, Salesforce, and more. Become the transformational leader your campus needs by participating in discussions on important topics like online student demands and preferences, increasing affordability and accessibility, branding, measuring marketing performance, and much more. Insights EDU is the conference you need to attend in 2024. Register now at insightsedu.com and use the code EdUp to save $50 off your registration.